406. So the purpose of this meeting is to have a question and answer session surrounding the budget ordinance as well as the finance presentation. And so we're just going to dive right into Q&A unless someone had any initial comments that they wanted to make. I'm not seeing anyone wanting to make any initial comments, so we're going to dive right in. And just as we do during council meetings and committee meetings, just go to the podium if you wish to speak. Councilman Glover?
Thank you, Madam. Sounds like it's feeding back a little bit. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions. I will make a few comments and discuss what I think is wrong with the budget. I think teachers should absolutely be paid. I think that a lot of things should be done in the city. I think priorities should be aligned properly. I think it's an insult to the employees to do a 2% cost of living adjustment. And after we had the massive tax increase that we had last year, I also think it's wrong that we are not going to let people have some of their money back. To say that if we're 5% over or 6 or 7% over projections and be proud of that and not let the people of Nashville have that money back is wrong. And so outside of that, I mean, Madam Chair, you and I spoke the other night for a bit, and thank you. I just think that there's a number of things that could be corrected in it. I'm just not sure if anybody really wants to lower the tax rate and give the people of Nashville some of their money back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Let's see. Councilman Mendez?
Thank you, Chair. I'll have just a couple of questions that I want to frame a little bit first. First, I want to say that I do think the budget is a pretty good starting place. I view the goal of this year and the next couple of years is to move us from having stabilized the city's finances to moving so we've got long-term sustainability. I do believe that working together, this council can improve upon the proposed budget, and so I'm looking forward to that process. Moving to my comments, I'm going to share some facts, a couple of opinions, and then ask questions, I think, of Mr. Crumbo. The facts. First of all, rate increases should accumulate savings in their first year. That's just a fact. Unless you're going to tweak the tax rate every single year, which we've never done, there's no history of that, nobody intends to do that, then the first year after a rate increase, you should accumulate savings, it should plateau, and then start going down as you lead up to the next rate change, whenever that is. Second fact, how you feel about the amount of savings should depend on how much planned spending you've got in mind for future years and how long you plan to go without a rate increase. Specifically, if we said we're going to go another 9 years like we've done previously without a rate increase, then the spending allocations in this budget are too much, and we should reserve more for savings in order to make it that long. If we revert to historical norms and change the tax rate every 3 to 5 years, then maybe the amount of savings we've got, fund balance we've got in this budget is appropriate. Next fact, this city does not have any forecast for either one of those factors. It doesn't have a piece of paper anywhere where we could see what planned spending might be for the next couple of years, and there's no stated amount of time that's anticipated until the next rate increase. Now, I understand that's because we've had serial crises and things blowing up and things getting blown away. I think that work might have been done absent that. But right now, there isn't any sort of forecast about future spending. There's no guesstimate of how long will be before the next rate increase. And how you feel about fund balance and this spending should depend on those factors. This budget proposes a fund balance that's still below the Government Finance Officer Association recommended 2 months worth of expenses in fund balance. So our fund balance is not the dumpster fire it was in the last several years, but it's still below recommended levels from professionals. Every penny of fund balance that we decide to spend in this budget brings the next rate increase closer in time, and we should be keenly aware of that. Now, I'm going to move to some opinions. I think the more frequent rate changes every 3 to 5 years are better. It makes it more predictable for citizens, for the government, and allows for more government services because there's more reliable cash flow. I also respectfully to the mayor believe that the evidence is that his gut instinct toward what the rate should be are in the direction of what he would call lean and what I would call underfunded. Last year caught us up to where we should have been 3 or 4 years ago. I also think, my opinion is that if you look forward a few years, the odds of the mayor proposing a rate increase in the election year of 2023 are slim, very slim. He expressly voted against it in the election year in 2019 when he was in the council. So that begs the question, is the rate going up again next year in 22 or after the next election in 24? And again, how you feel about fund balance, how we feel about fund balance should depend on when we think that rate's going to go up again. Now, is this year's spending consistent with waiting till 2024 to raise the rate again? I would argue, I don't have the data because it hasn't been done for a forecast, but I would argue this year's spending is likely inconsistent with rate waiting 3 more years till 2024 for another rate increase. Again, in the absence of that information, this means we should err on the side of not dipping into fund balance as we go forward. Not. It's attractive. It's a big number compared to the dumpster fire it's been the last couple of years. And so it's going to be attractive. We should not do that if there's any chance that we got to wait till 2024 before the rate gets tweaked again. So with those as context, I want to ask Mr. Crumbo, am I correct that there is not a multi-year cash forecast with expected new spending and or indicating when there might be a need for a further rate increase?
Thank you, Councilman Mendez. We're just waiting for the audio to come on there. So I listened to your remarks and generally agree with most of your comments. And with the question that you've got here in terms of multi-year forecasting, we do have a skeleton of a forecast into the future. That skeleton, though, is primarily based on things that we know to be true year in, year out that are fixed. So we have a pretty good idea right now what our property tax revenues would be, and I think within some reasonable range what our activities could look like. Underneath that, we have a lot of fixed costs for running the government that are well known, education, public safety, and there'll be inflationary pressures there. What we don't have right now, and I think it's very important here and speaks favorably of your point, is we've just reached stability here and to the point to where we can start looking at what it's going to take to be sustainable and make some of those choices. So as soon as we conclude this budget process, and I expect to learn a lot from it, we'll start bringing that skeleton, into something that's more in line with what, to your point earlier, what we had hoped to be right now. But we don't have that today, and so we don't have a good predictor yet of what our property tax rate, I think is primarily what you're referring to, would be. In large part, that'll depend on some economic forecasting we still have to do, but you're correct, we still have that work to do. It's in front of us.
Thank you. And just one follow-up. Would you agree that in the absence of such a detailed forecast and plan, that the council and the mayor should err on the side of not cutting into fund balance at this time?
No question.
All right, thanks. That's all the questions. The only other thing I want to mention is that hopefully we have much more of a normal year on the budget. I would encourage everybody to get their comments and any changes they'd like to the chair as early as possible, so we can move this ball forward and get done on time. Thanks a lot, Chair.
And Chair, if I could add to my comments a moment ago, just for some of the others here that may be less familiar with the topic. So when we talk about our cash and fund balances that Councilman Mendez was referring to, those are two different things. They do relate to each other, but by and large, it's the dollars that we would have in a rainy day. It would be the capital balance generally if you were at a corporation. It's in that vicinity, and it gets a little clouded with government accounting. But the levels that we've reached right now, to Councilman Mendez's point, are still a little below the GFOA recommended amount of 8 weeks. We're trending around 6 weeks or so, and we're fortunate that as a metro government, we have an internal treasury management function that is quite sophisticated, and it allows us to move some monies in and around the metro government, particularly from water services and elsewhere, and gives us the feel that we've got a bit more cash and fund balance than we actually do on any particular settlement day. And so what I would like to see over a period of time, of course, is for us to come up to what my peers across the country would recommend, that being the GFOA, and for us to become less reliant on those treasury functions and more reliant just on the raw cash and fund balances themselves. So hope that adds a little more information, Councilman, to the question that you're asking.
Councilman Bradford?
Thank you for recognizing me, Chair. I don't serve on this committee, so I definitely appreciate the opportunity to ask this question. During the mayor's state of Metro, he expressed the desire to expand staffing both in emergency services, the public works department, teachers, but I know I'm not the only one in this body who has heard complaints and fielded questions about how long it takes for the permitting process and other departments that have been chronically understaffed for the last decade. I'm curious, from the administration's point of view, are we only looking at those certain departments, or are we looking at Metro across the board, looking at increasing staffing levels? We know we need more codes employees to help handle all codes enforcement. Metro Animal Care Control is running at numbers too low for it to operate for a city this size. So I'm wondering, I asked the mayor when he made his budget that we invest in our departments that we've asked to make cuts for the last 10 years and try and get them up to a standard for a city our size. So if you can answer those questions, I'd be appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Thank you very much, Councilmember. This is Kristen Wilson, Chief of Operations and Performance. And I hope you'll appreciate this answer. I think the mayor does share the need for us to increase staffing in response to the growth and the demands of our community. And we have been able to make investments in just about all of our departments where they've requested in response to those demands or to maintain continuity of service. You'll have opportunities to talk with them further in their departmental hearings. But to your specific questions about planning and codes, for planning, we are adding headcount, 5 planners, particularly around community planning, also looking at hillsides and landscapes. We're adding 2 planners on top of those 5 for affordable housing, which the mayor had highlighted in his state of Metro. And we're also making some additional investments around software, a relationship that we have with the Civic Design Center, overall just making sure that they have the resources that they require. On the code side, since you had also asked specifically about codes, we are increasing their staff by 10 further, which was the request that came in from them for the level they needed to respond to the demand volume they're seeing. And maybe just as importantly, we've been doing some things to optimize vehicle availability for them from a fleet perspective so that they aren't waiting for cars in the morning or trying to assign folks to the cars. They can get out the door immediately and get out into the field. And that's been a project that's been underway for about a year now to increase their efficiency as well. So we feel pretty good about those investments. There's also some software investments as well for them too.
I appreciate you bringing up the software because that does come up with a question I've had and a complaint I've heard is when someone files to, say, example, build a garage on their property, they apply for the permit and then they have to submit documentation, but then, once they do that through the permitting process, then they have to turn around and the applicant then has to go to water, health, and all the other departments. Why can't that be done in-house so that if I was applying for a permit, I give you everything, and then once it's done with permitting, then they send it to the departments it's supposed to go. So are we looking at software or an ability so that we can do that in-house and reduce the amount of work that the applicant has to do?
Yes, we are working towards that, and it's interesting to me, you know, Nashville moved towards what's called a one-stop shop on development and permitting earlier than a lot of other municipalities did. I remember in my prior experience in hearing about Nashville's one-stop shop for development. When I got here, what I discovered is we created a building where we had a lot of those primary functions in one place, but that didn't necessarily mean that they were integrated from a workflow perspective, which is what you're describing. We have been working over this past year on an initial phase to move everyone to a similar software platform for plan review. This is going to take multiple steps. It's a platform, I think it's called Bluestream. I might be getting the wrong name for it, but that they'll be able to do plan reviews across all the various disciplines. That said, for actual permitting issuance, there's a larger effort underway with ITS, and I can get you more details on it offline. We funded in the CSP the first phases, which is really kind of much more of a greater assessment, and that's going to bring in, I believe, well over 15 departments who have various permitting functions. There's efficiencies to all of us getting on the same platform. We'll spend less on software, so there's kind of an ideal version of that for us from a cost perspective, but it'll make the user experience a whole lot better too.
I appreciate that. I know several people that'll be happy to hear about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilson, can you talk some about the federal dollars that we're anticipating for Metro and any ideas that the administration has for how that money will be spent?
I can start this off, and then I might defer to my colleague. I think Mary Jo Wiggins is also over here behind us, and I'd love for her to speak more broadly to the American Rescue Plan, I believe is what you're referring to, which is the latest federal stimulus. I will note that we actually still have funds underway from a December stimulus that was passed by the outgoing administration. For example, out of Metro Action Commission right now, we have emergency rental assistance, I believe on the order of about $20 million that's being dispersed right now to help individuals with rental and mortgage assistance. And there's also some additional funding that's been coming through from that prior stimulus still related to utility payments as well. So there is a lot of funding already circulating right now in our community before we even talk about the American Rescue Plan. And again, I'll defer to Mary Jo to elaborate further if and as needed on that. On the American Rescue Plan, Mary Jo can provide the overall context. We're still figuring out how much money is specifically coming into Middle Tennessee, because some of it is coming through state agencies. And in the coming weeks, we'll have to spend some time further understanding that. But for us in particular, we're waiting and we're hopefully days away from receiving $133.5 million, which is the first of 2 allocations of local relief funds. We're currently working pretty hard right now to understand and think through how we will apply those. I believe this was covered by our Director of Finance, Kevin Crumbo, in his presentation, that we want to be very careful about treating those as one-time funds, that we don't use them for any recurring costs. We do still have an emergency response underway. We're going to prioritize our emergency response and are thinking about how we utilize those funds. All we need is for a variant that the vaccines cannot mitigate to erupt, and we will need to have some funding available for us to deploy the same mitigation strategies we've been using over the last several months. Additionally, a lot of our emergency infrastructure is in pretty tough shape over the last year and a half of disasters and emergencies. So we're also going to be looking to replenish that emergency infrastructure. Further, there has always been a humanitarian effort for us to help those who are impacted. We use that the funds for that with the CARES Act, our first stimulus of funding we will look to use some of these funds as well for that purpose. But just as we did for the CARES Act, we will hope that we'll be able to look for ways for gap fill and to better leverage the federal funding that's coming through. And again, like the emergency rental assistance, there's a lot of that. So we're trying to understand where those gaps exist and how to plug them. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our Deputy Director of Finance, Mary Jo Wiggins, to elaborate.
Thanks, Kristen. And there's not too much to add in detail other than just a reminder of the eligibility. So as Kristen said, we haven't received that guidance, which is very unusual at this point. With the CARES Act, we had 30 days before we received the funds and any guidance. And with the American Rescue Plan, they offered 60 days. That 60 days is up on Monday the 10th, and we still don't have that information. What we have in the preliminary legislation are the 4 criteria, which is that the funds can be used for some of the same COVID-related expenditures that we saw in the CARES Act. It can be available for premium pay to certain employees. It can provide government services to the extent that we incurred lost revenue because of the pandemic, and it can be used for investment in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. That's the only guidance that we have at this point. So the framework that we've been working on is very tentative until we can get, the definition of government services, until we understand how far back can we use the funds. Do they go back to January 1st of 2021? Do they go all the way back to March of 2020 when the pandemic started? Are they just from March 10th when the legislation was enacted? So we really need some of those details to firm up a framework, but Kristen gave you a great overview of those primary, components that we plan the first tranche of funding, which is continued emergency response, some infrastructure, replenishment, and investment in our own departments that we did not put forth in the CARES Act funding. We need to take care of our community, and we know we have some one-time expenses that are not in budget that is an opportunity for us to take, use these funds for some of these one-time expenses. So as we get that guidance, we will share it. It really should just be, that literal any day now. I guess there's one other thing that just as the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan has other buckets of funding. So it's also important to remember that it's not just the local government support, but we do know that schools will be receiving additional funding. We know that there's additional funding for the airport and things that MAC has already heard about with Head Start, some of our utility assistance. Kristen mentioned the emergency rental assistance from the second stimulus package, but there's also another round of emergency rental that's coming through with the rescue plan. So just as our $121 million from the CARES Act really was expanded to almost $260 million because of other sources of funding, the piece that we know we'll get in local government will be supplemented with all of those other streams of funding. And those are the ones that we don't know if they come directly to us or if we can apply for them, if they go through the state. And that's what we're still continuing to try to find out, and we don't have that information.
So Ms. Wiggins, we know that with the 121, there was a portion that went to Metro to cover Metro expenses. Has there been any thought to what the Metro portion would need to be of the money that's coming with the ARP funds? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. We do know, if you think about it, we did an analysis on our assessment centers, our homeless shelters, the PPE that we've been spending, the extra overtime and expenses to enforce the public health emergency orders. And in a 6-month period, that was estimated at $20 million. If we look at covering all of FY22 at 12 months, we will be in excess of 20. It could be double to 40. Again, it's that type of reserve that Kristen mentioned. If there is any kind of additional outbreak or other needs related to COVID, we want to make sure we have that. So that would be what we would put in the city's emergency response. And then there's also that piece on infrastructure that is less related to COVID specifically. But if we think about our public safety and emergency response and our health department that have had to respond not only to COVID, but a tornado, a derecho, civil unrest, a bombing, an ice storm, and flooding. So there is a lot of reinvestment into those operations that need to take place that would fall more under city expense than community.
Councilwoman Allen, are you about to ask something about federal funds? Because I had one more question.
It was related to this, if
Okay,
that's
go ahead.
appropriate at this
Go
time.
ahead.
To go back to the rental assistance funding that's coming in, do we know that we're effectively reaching all the people who need it? I mean, I just continue to hear of the possibility that people lose their homes simply because they didn't know how to get connected to the funding that was out there. And we were so effective, I think, during or after the tornado at using local groups that knew the communities in need very well and even went door to door to communicate with them. Would this funding allow us to perhaps hire those groups or pay United Way or whoever is most logical to do that to ensure that that funding actually reaches people that are in danger of losing their housing?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Allen. We did actually just have a conversation with Dr. Kroom and talked about the operations at MAC and that they are really finally have a system, a database that is now up and running. They are looking into a partner portal that can be an add-on to that. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program, everything's got an acronym, ERAP. ERAP had very different rules than we used in our CARES Act funding. So it was much easier for external partners to administer those funds because there was not as many rules and regulations. The ERAP funds do have a little bit more criteria that have to be met. And so it allowed, having it internally administered from the start allowed those rules and regulations to be set. Now that the applications are being received, the funding is starting to go out, it's a much better opportunity now that kind of the playing field has been set to now partner. So Dr. Kroom is open to that. We really just had to get that foundation right. And just today she talked about a partner portal. So it is a possibility.
Great. I would love to hear more about that offline. Thank you.
And if I could add just a little bit further to that answer, I think Dr. Kroom has been very strategic as well about aligning with the General Sessions Housing Court and working with landlords and individuals as early as possible, even ideally before they start entering those proceedings. I think that has been a unique strategy that we hadn't involved as well in advance with the CARES funding. She's also working very closely with organizations like MDHA, because some of those individuals that are on voucher programs have rental obligations that they've been struggling to meet. So there's a lot more alliance work, I'd say, occurring within Metro with Metro Action Commission than had been previous, and we're looking forward to seeing that expand the amount of help and the individuals we can reach out to.
Thank you so much. We had a shift in the chair, so I'll be chairing the meeting from this point forward. Councilmember Evans, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me, even though I'm not on the Finance Committee. I have a question kind of related to the recurring expense comment that you'd made about the American Rescue Plan. And I guess thinking about the administration's budget, do you have an idea of what non-recurring expenses are currently included in the mayor's budget and what that amount might look like if those have been parsed out for consideration under the American Rescue Plan dollars?
Hi, I'm Tom Edelman with in the Budget Office, Deputy Director of Finance. We're using some of the money for those departments, State Fair, the Municipal Auditorium, and the Farmers Market that have been impacted by revenue this year and have not seen their revenue coming in to support their operations. So we do have those one-time fundings that are being used from the American Rescue Plan, or plan to be used for that in this upcoming budget.
Do you know what that amount looks like across those departments? Just out of curiosity, and if you don't, I can ask it later.
I can get that number for you. I don't know exactly. I think it's in the low millions, 5 to 6 million.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I had.
And I will go ahead and ask a few questions. My first question is with regards to the pay plan that is proposed in the mayor's budget, and what would be the cost for the additional amendments that were proposed? Sorry, Kristen, I'm trying to get your mic on.
Awful. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This is Kristen Wilson, and we'll have to get back to you with a final number. I believe it's somewhere on the order of $6 to $7 million. Further was approved by the Civil Service Commission. But if I may take a moment and talk a little bit more about what we have in the budget. You know, across all of our enterprise funds, what we advanced forward in the mayor's budget was actually the recommendation by our own Human Resources Department. It's the largest pay plan increase for Metro government employees on record. Though I want to be fair and not be accused of over-exaggerating, the second largest was $29 million in 2019. $30.4 million is the second largest incremental investment that we made in the FY22 budget behind MMPS. For the general government, so if we take out the enterprise fund piece, this is an investment of about $25.4 million, which is the GSD and the USD numbers if you add them together. It's data-driven. It reflects Metro's philosophy on fair and appropriate pay. There's a 2% COLA that will keep Metro employees tracked to the 10-year cumulative Bureau of Labor and Statistics Inflation Index. It includes adjustments for employee pay, where we found employees anywhere outside of a 10% range, benchmarked across 22 peer city governments. It's equitable across employee groups. The step increase is equivalent to about the 3% increase proposed for open range. And we also included an equity adjustment, was what we called it, which is there's an attempt for employees to be able to receive the step on July 1st instead of waiting for their typical data service. Now, why didn't we do a double step? Beside the overall work that we were doing within the budget around affordability component, most municipalities, and certainly most of the major cities in Tennessee, did not do any increase last year at all for their employees. We did a 1% COLA for all employees, along with $20.5 million total investment in hazard pay to recognize the important public service of our employees in a challenging pandemic year. Additionally, unlike many peer cities, we did not do any furloughs or layoffs last year as a result of the economic challenges we were facing. There has never been done for the employee population in anyone's recollection that we can find, and this is across decades, that we've done a double step across the entire population. Again, in 2015, there was an extra step given to certain employees only in police, fire, and corrections, where there was demonstrated compression to make up for no steps in 2011, 2012, or 2013. Anyways, it's a decision ultimately for you all to take as a body to determine if you want to pursue the civil service recommendations. I think there will be some legal advice that might be involved in the ability for council to do an increase. And I know that I'm sure that you'll be ably counseled by J.O. and Cooper on that.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that question, do we know what years since 2015 the steps were missed?
We can get you that data, I am sure.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, seeing none from the body, I will ask another question, and then Councilmember Benedict, I'll come to you next. My next question is with regards to MNPS and the funding that they will be receiving. Is there anyone that can speak to how MNPS will be using those federal funds? It is my understanding that those funds are reimbursement, and does MNPS have those funds to pay upfront?
Can you hear me now? Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Carrie Randolph from MNPS. I'm Executive Officer of Strategic Investments. Thank you for the question. I'll answer the first part. So we are a reimbursement state in Tennessee. So we have been allocated ESSER 3 funds under the American Recovery Plan. But those funds are not available to us until we apply for them and have an approved budget by the Tennessee Department of Education. That application opened today, May 6th. And is due August 1st. We're required to run a community engagement process with this round of funding in order to develop our application.
Thank you so very much. And Councilmember Bradford, I apologize, was next before Councilmember Benedict. I apologize, everyone. I can't see that well from a far distance, so if I don't see you, just wave your hand and I'll get you. So thank you. Councilmember Bradford, you're recognized.
Appreciate it, Vice Chair. So my question goes back to our conversation we were having on American Rescue Plan funds. And my question is, one of the allowed uses is for infrastructure. And as we saw a couple months ago, our stormwater infrastructure is in dire need of some fixing, upgrading. So do we have an idea of how much we're going to need to spend to correct our stormwater systems and our water infrastructure? Or is that a question I should wait until we have representatives from Metro Water? I just want to know if these are one-time funds that we can use for infrastructure, why don't we go ahead and use it and get our infrastructure to where it needs to be for a city our size in 2021?
This is Kristen Wilson. I'll be happy to start with that answer, and I'd say a more complete one will be offered by our Water Services Department, and we'll make sure to refer that question to them. I do believe they're undergoing a strategic plan effort right now, plus a cost of services study that would be associated with that, and they can probably elaborate a little bit further on that. Some of it, from my observation, is a matter of determining what level of risk mitigation you want to undertake. One of the most effective programs we have had, and we've been discussing potential uses of the American Rescue Plans with them for this, have been the FEMA home buyout programs. So we have a number of places within our county, and this isn't unusual, this has been a challenge nationally, where development occurred kind of in advance of our understanding of our floodplains and our floodwater systems. And so we have a number of homes that now at this point are in a repetitive loss situation. And there's been a really great program underway already in which Water Services has been partnered with FEMA to buy out those homes, buy out those properties, turn them into green space. They've been a very effective green space for us then, because once you remove the development, the concrete, the driveway, you've got a new permeable surface there that also can absorb stormwater. So it's an effective mitigation technique, as well as, at the end of the day, it has been very helpful for those specific property situations. We are looking at what our opportunities might be to accelerate that. There is a cost to Metro. It's a share of the buyout program, as well as, again, I'll defer to our colleagues when they do their hearing to share further about other mitigation techniques and other ways they're approaching that plan and the cost of services for it.
Okay, and a follow-up to that could either go towards our legal counsel or to the administration. So if we're going to look at speeding up taking houses out of the market that are in these repetitive loss zones, during a time when housing is very, very short in our city, is there a way we can use some of these funds to help address and offset the fact that we are going to try and take more housing off the market, whether it's partnering with nonprofits or Metro going in, building properties, and then turning over for selling to increase our housing stock? Is there conversations going on about the mitigation of that?
I don't know all the conversations that Water Services is having around this program, and so if it's okay, I'm going to pass that question to them and ask them to be prepared to answer it at their department hearing. All right, thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Bradford. Councilmember Benedict, you are recognized.
All right, I turned the button on hoping that would help. Cool. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. So my questions are a lot around public safety, and looking at the budget from last year, well, looking at this year's budget, there's a 7% increase in top line at $2.65 billion, but in our MNPD budget, it's an 8% increase. So I'm curious, it's $17 million, so it was $209 million, and in this year's budget, it's $226. What can you share with me about that increase and why that would be larger than the general budget overall?
I can speak to some of the investments we made. I'm going to turn to our finance colleagues to actually speak to those percentages, because I have different numbers than I think what you just cited, which just might be my reference point. So I'll let them speak to that. If you're speaking specifically to the police department, is that correct?
That's right. Yep.
Thank you. What we are funding are 40 officers for the 9th precinct, which, by the way, is not the total population of officers we'll need ultimately for our precinct staffing, but it certainly is a step in building out that we believe over the next 2 to 3 years we'll need to continue to build out our sworn police force in order to properly staff that precinct, which we funded in the capital spending plan. 8 sergeants for body-worn cameras. In particular, these sergeants are going to be 1 per precinct that exists now. They're going to be coaching and developing officers using the body-worn camera footage. This has been a best practice that has been seen in a lot of other municipalities, that very important investment that we've made in body-worn cameras isn't just evidence of incidents that have occurred, but they're really great tools for reviewing and helping our officers develop and increase their skills, particularly for community-oriented policing. There are a number of things right now that the police are using salary savings because of vacancies that they have to fund, and we looked to true a lot of that up in the budget. Some contractual items around IT applications, some of their uniforms allowance is occurring right now through salary savings, and so there's some investments in that. There's Crime Lab. We're looking to increase. They've developed a backlog over the course of both COVID, but also in general. We've seen that they've had a hard time keeping up with the processing volumes of things like sexual assault kits. And so we are looking to add a couple of FTEs to the Crime Lab, as well as help them with some of the software and some of the systems that they have in the Crime Lab. Again, these are more working situations than they are big capital items, though. Training, we are looking at investing further in MNPD training. We think this is a very important value that came out, and there was a fair amount of advice in the Police Policy Commission that occurred, and it's a very critical investment for us to make sure that we are endeavoring to increase the standards of training that we have in the police department. Behavioral health and wellness for officers. There's, in this case, a few officers who, again, have been funded out of salary savings that have been conducting behavioral health activities with our officers and wellness activities. This is an important safety function within the department, and we are making sure that that is fully funded. There's some small amounts of money that also go to facility management, their badging system, some funding that goes around officer physicals, medical services, supplies related to that. We also restored their longevity pay, as we did with all of our employees, travel funding, as we did with all of our departments. And also, if you recall last year, the body-worn cameras were sitting over in the admin bucket, the expenditures for that, for both police, the DA, the public defender. We have reallocated those funds into the departments themselves this year, as we've gotten a better level of our sense of what's needed there for each of those entities. I'm going to turn it over to my finance colleagues, though, just to make sure that we have clarity on all the numbers that you cited.
Sure. Yeah, Council Lady, I didn't catch the percentage that you mentioned.
Sure. So let me run through the numbers. So the budget overall is a 7% increase up to 2.65 billion, based on my math, right? So the I don't have the number right here, but 100 and whatnot percent increase divided by 2.09 from last, or sorry. Anyway, those numbers aren't in front of me right now. From the police department, I was looking specifically just at MNPD at 209 million last year in the ordinance. I'm sorry, in the final ordinance. And then in this budget, it looks like it's just a hair under 226 million. Again, just for MNPD. For a little, and so that's an 8% increase, 209 versus 226.
Okay, I not have to work your math. I was looking at a different number that I had from them from the beginning, but let me get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. I mean, overall, I just want to, call out that, it's fantastic that we're funding education, and that's 38% of the budget when we look at the pie that was provided, the graph. Public safety and justice is 20% of our budget, so those are the two biggest chunks, making up 58% of the budget. Our general government, infrastructure, our health, our hospital authority, and our social services, and our recreation and culture, and our make up 26%. So all of that combined is, barely over. Take out recreation and culture, and you've basically got a wash with public safety. So I'm really interested in learning during the departmental hearing about those, about the specifics with regards to where things may have been in the past. And, I'm certainly not suggesting that. I know we need the officers for Southeast. I know that's the need down in that direction, but I think it's important that we line out and explain to the public at a time that they want us to rethink policing, that we're able to explain why that budget is increasing even more than the rest of the budget overall. Beyond that, I think it's just important that my constituents, as I continue to look at the budget and department hearings, I'm going to be looking for infrastructure improvements. Again, looking at that's just 5% of our budget, so I know that we've got a lot of work to do. I'm hopeful that some of the federal dollars that we get, we're able to put towards that. If we can you speak a little bit more? So one-time expenditures on those federal funds, can they be general operational expenditures for one time? Could you, I wasn't quite clear on that. I think that was Mr. Crumbo maybe, or Ms. Wiggins.
Thank you. The one-time expenditures that are not in the budget that we do plan to bring forward for use of funding, there is 4.8 million, as Mr. Edelman said, related to subsidies for the fair market, the state fairs, fairgrounds, and municipal auditorium. Those three enterprise funds have been negatively impacted in their revenue generation because of the pandemic. I mean, as you know, the fairgrounds and the municipal auditorium have been serving as the homeless shelters. So the subsidies are really needed to provide a revenue for them in a time when they haven't been able to generate their own revenue. In addition to that 4.8 million, there's 1.5 million for nonprofits. Similar to what we did with the FY21 budget, we identified nonprofits that had traditionally been funded in the budget, and we have created a $1.5 million essential pool of funds, similar to the community partnership funds. If you remember, those were within departments. This 1.5 million is a combination of community partnership fund and direct appropriations. And it's an opportunity for those nonprofits to then be funded, again, through an application process, which is similar to last year, but through the American Rescue Plan funds rather than the budget. So that's just that 6.3 million that would traditionally have been in the budget is not.
Okay. And on the 133 million that the chair was talking about a little bit earlier, that also, could you explain a little bit more? Is that able to be used for operational costs, or?
So we believe so, but the only piece of guidance says that an eligible use of funds are government operations to the extent of lost revenue. We don't have any further definition of government operations, nor the prescribed formula or calculation of lost revenue. We have done preliminary calculations on our own we've been able to tell what we thought our FY20 budget revenue would be compared to what we ended up receiving in actual. There's a residual impact in FY21 and 22, but we do need to wait for that guidance until we know what that number is. But we do believe that the American Rescue Plan is going to provide some of that flexibility for us to provide government services. The really important thing to remember is that we want to focus on one time and not incorporate recurring services that would normally be in budget on a recurring basis and use one-time funding for that.
Right, okay, thank you for that.
And Council Lady Benedict, if I could just interject here. So there have been a lot of questions about the ARP, and I know it can be very confusing because we had, the CARES funding and things we saw about a year ago and how that played out. A few points here that I think may connect dots for you and some of the others that are asking these questions is that with the American Rescue Plan, when it comes to just the general government, we're expecting money to arrive in this month of May, the first tranche, and then a second one about a year from now. And the guidelines in terms of using that, as you keep hearing here, we have some at this moment, but those are going to be clarified in the months ahead. My own view on this, and what I would urge the mayor and the council to do with those monies, is to recognize the lesson we learned from the CARES Act, and that's that we saw this very same pattern happen, and what we learned kind of late in the process is that the ability to use those monies was a lot broader later than it was earlier. And so since we have solved so many of our own financial issues on our own, as a core government, and we're in a pretty good stable place right now, let's take our time in thinking through what we're going to use these remaining dollars for, because they are going to come in on, 2 different budget years. Likewise, that's just general government. We've got more than $300 million coming in for schools, and you heard just a little bit about that earlier. Those monies, very interestingly, are different than for the general government in that they do flow through a grant process. But what that's going to entail is that the general government will really need to be the banker, if you will, in that gap period between when expenses are incurred by the schools or applied for, grant monies are received. And one of the reasons I gave the answer to Councilman Mendez that I did earlier about our cash and fund balances and need to have those is so that we can be that banker, so that we can fund that working capital. And so from a budgeting standpoint, what I really encourage is that we focus on our core budget, realize we have a few touch points here early that we got to get some applications in and these pieces that Mary Jo was talking about a moment ago. But for the remainder, if we can put together good processes like we did for the CARES Act, we can probably find the highest and best use of those monies and do that over a period of time, so it really leads us to a sustainable place as opposed to a rush, and let's get it out there because we're in the middle of an emergency or in the middle of a pandemic, like we found ourselves last year. So hopefully that helps tie together a few pieces for you and put it in perspective in terms of the magnitude of those dollars.
Sure, okay, it does, absolutely. And, again, going to go back to the infrastructure and the conversation that the president's having all over the country right now. I'd love to see, some, and I know we all would, but the paving schedule looks great in my district this year as compared to the 0 roads we got paved last year. So those types of infrastructure improvements really make a difference with the public. Hopefully this is a softball. What's the % of the budget for economic incentives? 0.0 what?
It would be hard pressed to do that on the top of my head, but a small, very small number.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I think that that's important, certainly as we're talking about Oracle and people in the public want to understand how much money it appears that we give away to corporations, that we keep in mind what that brings back for us and also the small percentage of the budget that is. So
yeah, I'm sorry I don't have that percentage for you. We can certainly computate that, but I appreciate you bringing up this point. I think that the Oracle arrangement has brought to the front and center economic development again, which is marvelous for all the obvious reasons. We do have lingering commitments from other economic development from days gone by, and I know those are popular in some circles and less popular in others, and we had some tough decisions to make in this budget season last year. I would continue to emphasize that it's really important that we show that we keep our commitment to those that we've made it to. I think it speaks well of us as a city because, of course, we'd like to continue to attract the very best, just like the Oracle arrangement we have here.
would it be fair to say it's less than 1%?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This one's for MNPS, and I'm sorry, Vice Chair, you might have touched on the social emotional learning. I'm curious about the investment in that that was in the budget request, and if you could speak to what that investment will look like. When funded, I also will add, which is not an if, it's a when.
Thank you for that question, Council Lady. Chris Henson, Chief Operating Officer for MNPS. I'm assuming you're referencing the operating budget, social emotional learning funding. As part of the mayor's recommended budget funding allocation for MNPS, there was $2.5 million that was allocated or recommended for social emotional learning. Our Board of Education has not yet had the opportunity to discuss how that $2.5 million would be budgeted. We know that social emotional learning is one of the top budget priorities of the Board of Education, but as far as the specifics go, that would come a little later once the board has had an opportunity for that discussion.
Okay, thank you for that. Chair, that wraps up my questions. Thank you so much.
You sure you don't have a few more, Councilmember Benedict?
You know, I mean, I think did I use up my time? I yield back.
Thank you, Councilmember. I did have a clarifying question for Ms. Wiggins, and then we'll recognize Councilmember Sepulveda, Councilmember O'Connell, and I believe that maybe Councilmember Cash that I see in the back. And don't worry, guys, I found the cheat sheet, so I will be able to figure out which mic you're on. But my clarifying question for Ms. Wiggins, you spoke about the bucket for nonprofits. Can you explain just a little bit more about how the process is changing this year for funding for nonprofits?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. Historically, there's been direct appropriations that have included nonprofits, and you see some of those still in the ordinance for this year's budget. And also in the past, there were community partnership funds. That was $1 million split among 5 departments. And those departments each ran their own kind of application process. That was a pool of money, and they were really good about rotating the different nonprofits according to their mission for each of those individual departments. And so this year, some of those funds have been combined into a pool. I can't speak real specific to the process. It's happening out of the mayor's office, but there will be an application process really with a focus of criteria. And I believe, and I'll let maybe somebody from the administration speak, but the focus is really recovery. So as that pool is open for the nonprofits to apply for funding, it will be a focus of recovery. Now that's not the only pool of the rescue plan funds that will be available. That's the piece equal to what had typically been in the budget. We do anticipate much more community funding as part of the rescue plans, But that was just the small piece that had typically been a combination of direct appropriation and community partnership funds.
Hi, this is Diego Guerrero with Mayor's Office. So just a little bit of more detail on how those funds were separated in different buckets. So one of the things that we did was to look into the ones that have been traditionally going into the departments to figure out which ones are considered part of their operations, integral to their operations. So those are the ones that we are recommending to leave there. There are other ones that were more tied to either temporary mission, kind of what Mayor Joe explained, that those were going through rotations and whatnot. Those are the ones that are making most of that general fund bucket. That would be the ones that we would see changing based on the problem that we're trying to address with those funds, in this case being recovery and rebound. I have an actual list of the nonprofits and the amounts and whatnot, how they are. I only have 5 copies, so I don't think I have a copy for everyone here, but I'm happy to provide that to you, and if there's further questions, I can address those.
Thank you both so much. If you don't mind, that can be emailed out to the Budget and Finance Committee if you're okay with that. And then if you could also share any information about how any nonprofits that are interested, if there's an ability for them to apply for any funding, any information that you all have that we can share with nonprofits will be helpful.
Yes, we have a whole process drawn already on how it would operate, and we can go into details. We can talk to that a little bit more right now if you want to do that, or we can send all the material, and then if you have specific questions about specific parts of the process, we can address that offline as well.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sepulveda, you're recognized.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I want to go back to the comment about the increases for our employees. I had a question. I think I missed it. Was it COLA or step increases? And then the follow-up is, there was a mention of that being equitable, and I just wanted a little bit more information as to what that looked like. Since I'm looking at the Inclusivic report from 2020 that looked at 2015 through 2020, and it was saying that the salary gap between white Hispanic employees is 9.4K to 11K, and white and black employees is 8.6K to 9.7K. To be fair, you know, the number of Hispanic, Asian, and Native American employees have increased over time for Metro. So I just wanted some more information as to what the equitable aspect of this increase looks like.
This is Kristen Wilson. I think that's an excellent question, and I'm only going to be able to partially answer it. So I'm just going to ask for forgiveness on that up front. In terms of what is in the pay plan itself, there's a 2% COLA for all employees. Then on top of that 2% COLA for all employees, our employees have what's called merit increases. And employees fall into 2 general buckets. Either they receive their merit increases through a STEP program, or they receive their increases through what's an open range performance-based program. We have funded 1 STEP, and that is equivalent to about 3% of an increase, and we have also funded a 3% increase for the open range program. So what that means is all employees will be eligible for the 2% COLA. Oh, sorry about that. Looks like we got a thunderstorm warning. All employees will be eligible for a 2% COLA, and depending on what program they participate in, we have funded equivalent of a 3% increase as well, whether that is a STEP or an open range increase. To the equity component, again, I can ask HR to help a little bit more with the data. I do not want to misspeak or have statistics wrong in that. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask them to help us in following up on your question. The reference I made was to the fact that we took the STEP itself, and instead of waiting until different employees' dates of service occur, because different people started at different times, HR did what they called, with civil service, an equity move based on people's dates of service and accelerated their steps to occur on July 1st. So an employee who normally would have received their step in October will receive it on July 1st so that those employees are able to achieve that. And again, that was what they had called it is in the Civil Service Commission discussion. I don't think it answers your question fully, and if you'll allow us, we'll follow up and get you a better answer.
Yes, if you could follow up, that would be great. I'm interested in seeing how we close the gap between minority and white employees as based on their salary. I know that that's been something that has been gradually happening over administrations, and I just would want more information regarding that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sepulveda, did you have any other questions?
No, Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you so very much. Councilmember O'Connell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the administration for being here, as well as finance and all the folks who are helping us answer questions today. My first question is kind of a big picture question about where we are in sort of the timeline of Metro finances. So we raised property taxes for fiscal year 21, which is drawing to a close, and so we captured revenue there prior to the equalization process that comes with the appraisal. And so historically, we've only adjusted the property tax rate in response to that appraisal, basically setting, the history of Metro tends to be to set that 4-year stable basis for budgeting. So without a rate adjustment after this appraisal, per the mayor's recommended budget, are we able to forecast, do we expect that this is going to be enough captured revenue from last year prior to the equalization to avoid the kind of austerity we've been basically experiencing since fiscal year 18 by fiscal years 25 and 26, right, before the next appraisal, basically?
Yeah, so Councilman, thank you for your question. I suspect that just like Councilman Mendez and yours now, there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of inquiry about property tax theory, if you will. We have picked, an approach for this year. It's one that lands us in a very stable place for all the reasons I think so many of you heard me talk about that. What the future holds, I think, will be very much a function of what we've learned from the past, as well as what I think we can start projecting into the future. We just haven't gotten quite that far yet. And so I think a great deal of our thinking on that is going to be driven by the economy, and not so much just by the rise in property values that we see year over year, but what's that really going to mean in terms of recovering on our activities taxes, right? And so as we look at the forecasting I described to Councilman Mendez and so forth, that is going to be a big question going forward, but there's really no great answer to that today.
Yeah, I guess just pressing on that a little bit, we've obviously enjoyed a bit of a surplus that you've documented coming into this fiscal year. I guess what I'm saying is we will know now what our property values are countywide, obviously pending challenges, but within that margin, we will know for the next 4 years that basis for being able to budget. I'm saying more or less, absent surpluses, do we think that, you mentioned stable, right? I mean, are we expecting roughly that this will be, a 4-year stable period?
So I hope that it is. My own analysis right now is it's going to be, stable and hopefully growing. There's a lot of speculation right now. I'm getting a lot of questions from the public about this very thing. My crystal ball isn't really any better or any worse than others across the country right now. I've heard our Federal Reserve Chair talk about growth and expecting some good things ahead. I've heard other public officials say, hey, maybe it's not going to be quite that good. The lingering threat of a resurgence in COVID and variants and so forth, looms large for a lot of us right now. So I really don't have any better answer than that for you right now.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I understand the volatility. I just, I'm anxious about those years out because anybody who has served here for the past 3 years understands that we'd like to be transitioning to a period where we don't have this level of budget conversation every single year over year. I mean, historically, it's been, there's a pretty big discussion at that appraisal mark, and then, you know, it's stable for 4 years, and we come back and do it again after the appraisal. So would love to get back on that cycle if possible. In the mayor's State of Metro address, he suggested we would double our capacity for traffic calming bikeways and capital projects. And I apologize, this is me not having yet a searchable version of the budget, but could you all describe that program a bit more? What does that mean?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember O'Connell, and we can provide more details. He was speaking at that point in time about the staffing increases that we're proposing in the budget, particularly for the DOT. We are looking at increasing our staff by 42, and that, at the end of the day, will go towards specific programs, as mentioned in your examples. If you need some further detail about the existing levels of staffing there, I'll have to probably follow back up with you if that's what you're nodding.
Well, so that was my question. Was that sort of programmatic funding, or was the indication there that that was, to your point, more we're doubling our staff capacity for those programs?
What he was indicating is we're doubling our staff capacity for all of those programs.
Okay, and then to that point, and I understand this is kind of related to the transition related to the Department of Transportation. Metro Planning Department has, over the past couple of years, lost a number of transportation planning staff and has not been able to replace those under the kind of rolling hiring freeze we've had. Is the expectation now that that transportation planning function will actually migrate to the Department of Transportation, or will we also be looking to replace staff at the Planning Department?
There's a both and in that question. Ultimately, you can't isolate out, mobility in your overall planning and infrastructure conversations. Planning will still contain that responsibility overall for all of Metro. That said, we have a whole lot of opportunity, we believe, to bolster that capability, and a lot of that specific talent focused on transportation planning will be housed in the DOT.
So we're thinking then that Metro Planning will be able to replace a number of those staff positions now going forward.
Metro Planning is increasing their staff in this budget. That is correct. Again, I want to make sure to be clear, though, that it's going to be across a global. We are not looking for specialist transportation staff in planning. We will look for that to be in the DOT.
Got it. Thank you. And then somewhat related, there was also quite a bit of attention put on sidewalk delivery with the suggestion that we would build and repair 75 miles of sidewalks. I'd like to understand two things about that. One, how does that break down in terms of new versus repair? And then also, what's that acceleration? I mean, do we already have a way that we're going to do that that's going to work better this year than it has in the past, just on the basis of the Department of Transportation staffing? Because I know my colleague, Councilmember Henderson, and I have both spent a lot of time and energy over the past few years on the topic of sidewalk delivery and not made a lot of headway.
We can track down and get for you the specific calculations that were therein, but I believe they were related to the commitment that the mayor made in the speech, that he is looking to accelerate the performance of sidewalk construction as well as reduce the cost, and that additional 75 miles was essentially the example output to make it tangible of what that kind of an acceleration and a cost reduction could produce for us based on our current programs. But ways we will explore doing that are kind of multi-layered. One, having the appropriate staff capacity, particularly to program manage. Our sidewalk program is very important. Additionally, as we've delved in and tried to understand our sidewalk costs better, there's sort of a few different functions there. One is we have sort of one design that we use for our sidewalks across Metro, and the opportunity for us to come up with perhaps some different designs that better fit will have cost impacts out of that. As a result, that should lower costs. Today, the sidewalk standard, the sole sidewalk standard we have requires, and again, our topography requires this too, a lot of retaining walls, for example, to be built. if we are able to come up with some flexibility in our design standards, we may be able to move faster and reduce some of the need for that for situation-specific customization, I guess you could call it. That's one piece. Another piece is we are entering into additional conversations with our utility partners, both at MWS but also at NES. Right now, utility coordination, we bear most of the costs for moving around, particularly poles in the right-of-way when we undertake our sidewalk projects. And we're hoping that both from a better planning perspective and a better communication perspective with NES, as well as possibly even some further dialogue about cost sharing, that we'll be able to also look at that contributor to our costs. And then the final piece is one that I know Councilmember Henderson has been passionate about, which is vendor management, which just having further staff to actually make sure we're and getting the most value we can from the vendors that we have as they work on our projects.
Thanks, and that's very helpful. I think, just to make sure I understand, are we saying that we should or should not expect that by this time next year we will have 75 miles of sidewalks either in design or implementation?
I think the commitment that the mayor made was for us to have accelerated the timelines by the, and again, I don't have the percents right in front of me, but that you would see a difference in our costs structure and that you would see a difference in the timeline for us to be delivering within a year. And that would produce that. Now, I don't know if all of that will happen overnight. You're talking about a July 1 start for that to happen. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case. But the tangible example of an outcome of us operating in that way would be 75 miles more of sidewalk.
Okay, thanks. And then finally, the mayor's Affordable Housing Task Force, I think, is having its final meeting right now. In fact, it just kicked off, I think, a few minutes ago. There is $2.5 million in this budget. That's an increase, I know, for affordable housing funding as an allocation to the Barnes Fund. I looked through, kind of what I could already see and want to, I guess, do two things. One, are there other points of operating budget targeting affordable housing that I did not either notice in State of Metro or in my review of the budget document so far? And then also, with the timing of the Affordable Housing Task Force kind of coming to a close right now, is there some way to reconcile what I assume are going to be recommendations from that task force into FY22?
No, that's a great question. I appreciate that. I will tell you there's two other things that are in the budget. One of them's more obvious and the other one's not. In the admin section, there's a $500K investment in doing an affordable housing strategy from a long-term perspective. So what we believe we have coming out of the Affordable Housing Task Force are both a number of things we can move on more quickly, as well as some things that are longer term, bringing particularly the long-term aspects into a broader framework is important to us. And then this is maybe to me, one of the more interesting pieces of the budget is we are adding a couple headcount into planning that will be specialized on affordable housing. So there's 2 affordable housing planners being introduced into planning. We're looking forward to really making that much more key and centric to how we're thinking about our operations overall. And Lucy Kemp has offered to take that on. That $500K study will also be done through Lucy and her team.
Got it. Okay, so we've got $500,000 for study, staffing to implement it, and then $2.5 million for the Barnes Fund.
Yes, correct. And then as we move forward and look at the opportunity for the American Rescue Plan, and the mayor, as he committed in the state of Metro in bringing forward that proposal, you'll see additional funding in that American Rescue Plan for the Barnes Fund, as well as the startup of a investment fund that's among the recommendations from the Affordable Housing Task Force. We got a preview.
I figured you might have, and that's why I wanted to understand the link between the final work that they were doing and the budget. Thank you. All right, thank you, Madam Chair. That's all my questions.
Councilman Cash.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my questions are and comments are follow-ups from other council members, stuff that's come up. Councilmember Benedict asked about Metro Police and the kind of the level of funding, the percentage of the budget. And I know we have gotten a lot of feedback in the last year about from some groups about the level of funding for police, but I think we have plenty of others that don't want us to, it's less about, fewer or more as much as it is rethinking how we police. And so I guess I want to ask, and I know a lot of these questions that I'm going to ask are probably better asked department specific, but I guess in the police budget, I know I heard about the cameras, the body cams and some training for that. I guess my question, and that we're getting about 40 more positions in the new precinct. But I guess my question is, are we seeing any sort of shift in the types of positions that the police is asking to be funded? And are there other trainings other than, like, I guess, I don't know if the body cam training is more technological or if it's also kind of more also about how to approach citizens or problem situations. But I guess my question mainly is, do we see, we're funding body cams and we're funding 40 more police officers, but do we see many other shifts in the types of positions or the structuring of positions in this budget?
Chief Drake is going to be absolutely the best person to speak to this when he does his budget hearing, but if it's any help, I'll elaborate a little bit on the body-worn cameras and the sergeants we're putting in the precincts. That is entirely a coaching and development effort. So if you think about this, when these officers come back from being out in the field on duty, there is an individual who's dedicated to reviewing footages on a either sampled basis or on a specific reported basis to look at how the officer interacted with the public, to look at the way the procedures that were deployed, and to help coach that officer to better deliver the public safety services that our police represent for our community. This is typically utilized in particular for coaching around community-oriented policing and style and level of interaction. So it is a way that we believe we are going to further benefit from the investment that's already been made in the body-worn cameras. I think that it'll be very interesting for you to also talk with Chief Drake about the way he's thinking about this 9th precinct. I do think that there are shifts in the level of community engagement and the expectations he has in the roles of the officers, and I will leave him to elaborate. He'll do it a whole lot better than I can.
Okay, thank you. Also, on Metro schools, and I had some follow-ups about social emotional learning, and it's, I guess, partly a question, but really it's more of a suggestion, or will you, hopefully you will consider. As the school board is thinking about how to spend the money for social emotional learning, which I am fully supportive of, and fully supportive of restorative justice and rethinking how we manage student behavior and maybe manage isn't the right word, but react to and help forward. I hope that there is, as part of the process, that you all will reach out to schools and ask and get good feedback from them, and also recognize that maybe social emotional learning shouldn't look the same in every school or in every school in the same tier level, and that schools get some flexibility and some buy-in in how they make this shift to social emotional learning and make the shift of how we treat students and manage their behavior in order to help them do better rather than just punish them for things that they've done. I guess that's my main hope, is that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and that different schools have different ways to implement this. And I think that you will find, if they have some buy-in, that there will be a lot more, and their suggestions are heard, that there will be a lot more buy-in. And maybe rather than like one position for each school that is either for social emotional or restorative justice, that you consider, having a team and paying them stipends so that you have more people that are involved in pushing the change as they'd like to see it in the schools. And that was more of a question, a comment than a question, but I hope that you will solicit that feedback from schools.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilman. This is Hank Clay from Metro Nashville Public Schools, and you brought up excellent points. By the way, Councilman, if you ever want to come back and teach with us, we would welcome it. We've got some good pay coming, we hope. So Dr. Battle takes very seriously listening to all parties. She has directors' cabinets with our students to hear directly from them, with our teachers, with the principal advisory group, with our parents, their parent advisory council. And so we listen to them, we hear that feedback. We have heard loud and clear that advocacy centers are very important, and that'll be what we plan to take to the school board for their consideration of the advocacy centers. And for council members who may not be as familiar as your colleague on this topic, there are 3 different ways around social emotional learning that behavior issues are brought up. There's restorative practice, and I will not name the other 2 because I can't remember them off the top of my head. So thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up about, Councilman O'Connell asked about traffic calming, and I understood, and I'm not sure I got everything. I understood that the funding request is for more positions. The like grants that are given out to neighborhoods, is that something that's on the capital budget or in the operational budget?
I'm sorry, you might need to clarify the grants given out to neighborhoods.
Yeah, like in January and July, the traffic calming sub-department of
Yes, sorry,
Public
thank you.
Works gives out like 12 grants to neighborhoods. Is that capital or operational?
Typically, those come from our capital budget.
Okay.
But again, some of the employees now that will be managing those programs and will be engaging in them will be coming from the operating side.
Okay. Yeah, my just quick suggestion is like, I think there's a big demand for traffic calming. You can see it in the applications. And and I've shared this with Derek Haggerty and at Walk by Nashville workshops or sessions, that like I think we're missing out helping more streets or more neighborhoods by, kind of doing really fairly expensive traffic calming grants that only get to 12 or 12 over each cycle or 24 each year. And I'd really hope that we could consider making sure that those traffic calming grants get to, maybe that we have smaller grants that get to more neighborhoods if we have data that can show that we can make an impact on slowing cars down. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Vice Chair, and thanks all of you all for being here and letting us ask, I guess, kind of more general questions. That said, I did want to follow up a little bit on Councilman O'Connell and Councilman Cash's questions particular to traffic calming, to which I absolutely concur. And I think some of these maybe we can get at the Public Works particular budget hearing. But when we say that we're going to double traffic calming in an effort to kind of improve that programmatically, at present we just have one person on staff doing traffic calming. So getting 2, I don't know if that necessarily gets at addressing the concerns that you're hearing from council with 120 neighborhoods in the queue and sort of the need to be somewhat more tactical sometimes to do some of the smaller crosswalk improvements and just really scale that program. Because as we've discussed before, I think it's a really good way to deliver safety very equitably far across the county, more quickly and kind of less costly. So I think we'll all be looking to understand very specifically in that Public Works budget hearing, particular programmatic staff, so traffic calming, but also, are we working through a list of safe crossings as well, separately or programmatically, or if that will be part of traffic calming, and really what that staff picture will look like
relative to the increased capital investment, which we very much appreciate that was shown in the capital spending plan as well. So I'm just kind of projecting that ahead for the Public Works budget hearing particularly. Okay, and then also kind of segueing into a follow-up question of sorts, because I think Ms. Wiggins addressed it somewhat before, and Mr. Eguarte, is that correct? That works. Okay. Or you can tell me how it should be said, but Ms. Wiggins was speaking kind of particular to the charitable effort aligned with kind of COVID relief and how that relates to some of our charitable organizations. But I think, Mayor Cooper in his capacity as budget chair, Council Lady Vercher in years past, we've all kind of talked about this problem of the, what I kind of call the nonprofit Hunger Games, right? Where you kind of go to the back of the budget book, and because everybody's sort of line itemed, it becomes a place where we try to kind of, find the funds. And so we've had various kind of fits and starts, and I think Ms. Wiggins alluded to that, and Diego, I know you kind of know about that as well. But I would very much like to understand the process very specifically, because we have tried in several years to improve that process, but I don't think we've kind of gotten over that hurdle yet. And I do think it's very important that in any particular budget year, those line items are aligned with the broader strategic goals of the mayor and the government, right? And so in any particular year, those might change. And then having the charitable and nonprofit community understand that, right? Because I think we'd kind of gotten into a pattern of expectation. It was just in there every year. And the perception of that from a fairness perspective to, myriad worthy nonprofits isn't great. So I don't know if you can speak to it today with a greater level of detail, but I would appreciate that.
Councilmember Henderson, first of all, on your questions regarding Public Works, we'll give them a heads up to be prepared to speak to a greater level of detail about the staffing that they have programmatically and those increases. I will remind you, and you're aware of this, that, and as I cited, the individuals who are over some of these programs aren't the ones always actually out on the street. We also have contractors who do that work.
Understood.
And so though our individuals who are over those programs do play a critical role in planning and program management of those vendors. So I just want to make sure folks understand that there's a larger scale factor,
right,
to any investment there. But we'll get you a whole lot more detail on what specific roles are getting filled and how they map to specific programs, and create some opportunity for you to have that dialogue in the budget hearing. On the nonprofit front, what I'd say is what we tried to do in this budget is anytime there's a nonprofit that serves an operational mission,
right,
and there are many that do for us in how we deliver our services. My favorite example always is the Office of Family Safety. The nonprofits that we contract with and work with there are critical to how we actually deliver the services to those victims. And if they were not partnered with us and not contracted with us, we would actually require more employees in order to deliver those skills capably. And the reality is some of those are so specialized in terms of those skill sets, it would be less effective and less efficient for us to do that. So what we've done is we've worked very hard to try to understand where that's happening in those departments and to make sure we've got the right funding and the right direct allocations. So Office of Family Safety is one of those departments. The Juvenile Justice Center also similarly has nonprofits that are part of its mission delivery. And so those are both funded in terms of how they approach, and that's in their budget. They still have nonprofit funding in their budget. We also have had, though, other departments where the dollars were very helpful to the community nonprofits that are similarly aligned to advancing their mission, but weren't necessarily part of how they deliver services. And that's where, as Diego tried to explain, we've tried to pull those funds out And in those cases, in particular, we're putting it together into about $1.5 million is what it totals to. And we are going to look for a grant opportunity for those that will be over in the American Rescue Plan at minimum. To
I
fulfill
appreciate that. I was
commitment.
not quite, I think, making the connection between what Diego
That's
said
okay.
and Ms. Wiggins.
So right
Okay.
now, what we'd like to say is essentially, if you look at the various nonprofits that we do have in the budget that are being funded, we should be able to articulate to you what they're doing for Metro government, or how they're partnering with Metro government, or how they're serving them. And we're going to continue scrubbing that and looking at that. There's a lot of them in various areas, and so this is kind of step one in that, and we still have further work to do. I want to be clear about that. And if you find things that you want to ask us about, please flag that. We'll be happy to continue that exploration. But that really is our goal at the end of the day. Whenever it has a role in helping us advance our mission, or I should also note, we have some charter requirements to fund.
Understood.
some
The
select-
Symphony and the Adventure Science Museum.
Correct.
Yep.
You will find those in there. We'll meet those obligations, of course. That's really the perspective we're trying to take. Now, nonprofits play an important role in our community, and they are, right now, as Diego was saying, are critical to our recovery.
Right.
And so that's why we are looking to grant fund around the theme of recovery, and we're really looking to our American Rescue Plan dollars when we bring forward that proposal to help serve that.
Okay, I appreciate you pulling all that together. And Madam Chair, if I may, one more, as those first two were kind of tying together previous questions. Mr. Crumbo, I know in the context of the last budget, and then I saw as well in the presentation and some remarks you have made about our GSD, USD distinction. And those of us who serve both the GSD and the USD, it was very difficult last year to kind of explain, you know, the discrepancy and the kind of percentage increase. We all obviously have kind of our elevator speech about the distinction between USD rate and GSD rate particular to services. But I think as you have spoken to, and you and I have spoken in the past, the budget becomes, I think, very illegible to the public somewhat when, you know, this comes from GSD funds, this comes from USD funds, but then we transfer these things over there. And so I appreciate the $1 million from a budget standpoint to kind of study that and kind of get that fixed. But I wonder if you could speak to more particularly what form you anticipate that study taking, and what the just kind of the goals in that are, just from a legibility and understanding perspective, and also just a kind of a justification, like these are the true differences. Can you speak to that just a little more?
Yeah, so, you know, I've just been here at the government, 19 months or so, and this GSD, USD difference has been here, I think, since the charter came around in the 60s, right? So it enjoys a long history, and I think a controversial one from time to time. And by that, I mean simply if you live in one district or another, I think a natural question now or even in years gone by is, what service difference is there really between one or the other? And then, you know, we have the satellite cities still to consider if you want to get into the weeds there. And so, you know, last year when we saw this remarkable tax increase, for all the reasons that we've, you know, debated so many times with this council, it became pretty clear to me that those questions are getting bigger, not smaller, particularly as the USD continues to expand, and there's some debate, and, you know, as we're hearing here, about how to distribute public works and so forth. And so what I've really learned is that there hasn't been a real in-depth study of those differences, and I just think it's time that we go do that. And one of your peers here on the council, I think, brought this up a few times in the hearings last year, and that really spoke to me. And I penciled that into something I really wanted to see come forward this year, because there was precious little we could do about it last year, right? It was just too late in the process. So I think it's important to recognize that while that is a seemingly simple distinction, and you look at our financials and so forth, maybe you're correct, it gets a little complicated to see how those flow. It's time that we just do study that. And I'm not predisposed as to how that may turn out. It could be that it's, you know, less expensive than one thinks to be in the USD and more in the GSD. It could be that those things are close together. It could go the other way around. I really don't know yet, but I think we owe it to our taxpayers to dig into that In terms of scoping it, there are organizations that do this type of work across the nation that would have a lot more skills than I think we have here on our own bench just to scope that and launch it. But when it comes down to the raw data itself, it really is housed in finance, and I think some other places around the metro government will be looking to ferret that out. So I don't want to overcomplicate the issue, but I do think it's worthy of our study. And in the end, it could be that there's a dissolution of the GSD altogether. It could be that we find out that, hey, we need more distinction that we have. I really don't know how it's going to turn out yet, but I think it's important that we study it.
Okay, I appreciate that. But particular to the scoping, you will just kind of continue to be working on and thinking about what form that may take. I appreciate Council Lady Hancock's leadership on that. As I mentioned, I've served both the GSD and the USD. I serve 2 satellite cities, and as do several other colleagues. And so I think you're right to mention the satellite cities and some of those sort of legacy issues and funding issues, and just bringing more clarity to this space for the community. So I appreciate that anything will happen from a study perspective. Yes, let the experts look at that, peer cities, but I think as far as kind of what are the concerns in the community and the questions that we as council members hear and the assertions, maybe correct or otherwise, I would just encourage you to speak to a diverse pool of the council as you kind of scope that and consider what that study might undertake. But I appreciate that the mayor put that in the budget.
Just a little more perspective, a former social studies teacher of mine is going to be very proud if she ever sees me quote this, but there's the expression from Tocqueville that there's the tyranny of the majority. And that's what I observed last year when we brought around the tax rate. And so I think here it's worthy of the study and bring it to the whole council, as you say, and let's let everybody have a more fair voice in this for the future.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And it looks like we don't have anyone else in the queue, so I will wrap up with just a few questions here. First, Mr. Clay with the MNPS, I will have to say that I am slightly offended at your offer to Councilmember Cash to come back and teach. I've never received that same offer, so I would just have to let you know I'm remiss to hear that I'm not invited back to MNPS to teach. So. Obviously, I'm just kidding. But I did have a follow-up question from my earlier question about the MNPS funding, and please forgive me if you all did answer this. I was tinkering with the microphones, and I may have missed a small part of it. With regards to the federal funding being reimbursed, can anyone tell us where that initial funding is coming from?
Thank you. Hank Clay from Metro Nashville Public Schools. And I was thinking about that earlier. You are welcome to come back, as well as any of the other council members. For the question about where the money originally comes from on the reimbursement basis, Mr. Crumbo was referencing that earlier when Metro General Government basically acts as a banker for that. I like his analogy there, where we spend local funds first based on the approved state budget, and then we seek that reimbursement from the state. Since Dr. Randolph has come back, that process is really accelerating, and we seek reimbursement on a regular, frequent basis.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to make sure that was really clear because I did receive a question about that, so I wanted to make sure to explicitly ask, so thank you.
Yeah, and Council Lady, if I could just help a little bit, because I think this is going to come up more and more as we get through these hearings. The real technical term for that is our working capital balance, and what schools is going to experience and what we're going to experience along with them is really just solely a function of the way we're structured as a government and the way we run our treasury. It's through no fault of schools or anyone else that it's this way, but we do need to be just so very mindful that the hundreds of millions of cash that we're building up will need to be that banker, and just like any bank, we have to have capital to loan and to make it happen. So I think what will be important about that is to know that we do understand how that's generally going to work. We're going to take every step we can to work with the state and work with the schools to make sure that we accelerate these timing differences so that they go faster. But it is going to be quite a strain for the Metro government to fund those as those numbers get larger and kind of the balloon, if you will, of funds that are needed for our children come through. And it's a very worthwhile endeavor, but it's one that's going to take a lot of cooperation across the state and local government and the schools.
Thank you, Mr. Crumbo. My question for Ms. Wilson, I believe you somewhat addressed it, but just for clarity, do we know how many people are slated to be staff for the traffic calming program, or will we have to get that from Public Works?
We will have to get that from Public Works in their department budget hearing.
Okay, thank you kindly. And then Mr. Crumbo, can you put in layman's terms how much sales revenue was projected for last year and how much do we actually collect?
Sure. So I'll provide a schedule of numbers when I have a projector for our next one, or I can forward you some of the slides here. But generally, when we talk about our activities taxes, those are comprised of a pretty long list of items that, primarily are state shared sales taxes. And what I think is troubling to some as they watch the state report their numbers, then ultimately when we report ours, is that there's about a 2-month lag between the time a transaction happens and recorded by the state. They're able to process and then make some remittance to all the local governments across the state. So they tend to be a leading indicator of where we may be, but it's not a perfect indicator. Relative to the state and what they report overall, we have a lot more volatility here. I mean, even the facility we're in now, you can see it's not very busy right now, so our volatility on that's quite high. What we tried to do in our projections for the year that we're in now, so this fiscal year where we are, and then on into the next one, is to work with a group of economists, to work with the state, some of our own resources here locally, the CVC, Music City Center, and others, to understand what the trajectory is for our own economy. And so, as you've heard me probably say to the council last year and then here, it was widely thought that we would see this V-shaped activity, this V-shaped economy, or Nike swoosh. There's a lot of names have been put on that. And that generally happened. But the downward slope wasn't quite as steep as anyone thought it would be, nor has the climb out until recently been quite as steep either. What we're starting to see now is yet another introduction of a curve shape, and it's called the K shape, where parts of the economy are really zooming ahead and others are not. And if I had a little whiteboard, I could show you how the economists get a K out of that. So we've tried to account for that as best we can. What we are hopeful of is generally that the economy will continue to do really well nationwide, globally. We're hoping that ours will continue to do even better than that, and we're seeing some early signs of it, but it's not evenly distributed. And we've talked a lot about equity here on the lead up to the Oracle transaction and so forth. I'm sorry, the Oracle arrangement. So I think we'll continue to see that happen, but generally I'm expecting things to go up at a modest rate.
Do we have the actual number of the projection?
We do. I just don't have a projector or anything to put it up there for you, so I can forward that to you when we're finished here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And then my last question, if no one else has any questions, it looks like we don't. You talked about the increased revenue, and I believe that was about $180 million, only including about $50 million in organic growth, and that the rest was reflective of sales tax revenue returning to pre-COVID levels. So just by your estimation, does that mean that the revenue growth next year will be less? And my question is kind of geared around, we've kind of heard from a few of our colleagues tonight and through a few comments around the importance of looking ahead as we consider this year's budget and the importance of having a certain amount in that fund balance.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understood the whole question. Are you thinking about looking beyond this next fiscal year or just to this next fiscal year?
So with the 50 million that was the portion that was organic growth, is it reflective of the sales revenue tax returning to pre-COVID levels? What I'm basically trying to get at is, does this mean that our revenue growth next year will be less? Like, will we see less revenue growth next year?
Hard to tell at this moment. It's going to be a function of the economy. We're hoping to see, continued growth as the city grows, but there's no perfect way to tell what that's going to be. But generally, I think things are going to rise.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome.
And it looks like we don't have any other questions, so thank you all for sticking with us today. Our first operating budget hearing will be held on May 19th at 4 p.m. in the chambers. And Chair, if you have nothing else, we're going to go ahead and close out the meeting. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.